Okay. What is going on with Evander Kane? The guy is just an absolute menace. And just when you think you've heard it all, oh wait, there's more. And wait, there's more. And more. Like, what is going on? And this isn't new. It all started back in 2012 when Evander Kane would post this pic of him with $100 bills next to his head. And honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's pretty goddamn douchey, but whatever. Earlier on in his career, he would get sued or accused for assault several times. In 2015, and get this, my man would rent out billboards to get back with his ex, which caused a storm of media attention. He'd get sued by a bank for $15 million, and then by the Cosmopolitan Casino for $500 grand. And just when you thought you heard the end of it, he would even go bankrupt, even though he has earned over $60 million in career earnings. And wait. My man might even be sued for breaking COVID protocols. And at this point, fans are throwing up in just pure disgust. His own team doesn't even want him around. It has gotten to the point, even though Kane is objectively a great NHL player, he might even just be straight up tossed from the NHL, as we have never seen this level of just pure degenerate behavior ever. But I guess we'll see. What team will lay claim to this man? So with all this drama, all this nonsense, I thought it'd be interesting to go over NHL stars who have been sued in the NHL. I will say, these stories are very interesting and far more hockey related, so make sure to press subscribe for your weekly dose of hockey content. And also, if you want to see my dog again, you better press that like button. And yes, I am using my dog for likes, so do it. Dennis Wideman. And man, this one's weird. After being stolen in a trade by the Flames in 2012, Wideman, going into his 30s, proved to be a solid top 4 puck-moving defenseman who could put up stats and run a power play. However, in January of 2016, this would happen.
And then the linesman down at center ice, there was a collision there between one of the Flames.
Dennis Wideman would just straight up demolish Don Henderson, who was a linesman in that game. And after further investigation of the play, Dennis himself would receive a questionable hit just seconds prior, and he claimed that a concussion would cause this play. But right after he received that hit, he would just straight up rock him, which gave Henderson a neck injury and a concussion. This is like some KHL stuff. And as a result, not only would Dennis Wideman receive a 20-game suspension, but he would be sued by Henderson for $10 million. Now, after appealing the suspension, Dennis would lessen the sentence from 20 to 10 games, which means he lost $300K instead of roughly $600K. But what is wild about this is the fact that even though he blatantly gave Henderson a concussion, the lawsuit would be thrown out in court. And this was due to the fact that it should have never been brought to court but an internal arbitrator. But regardless, Don Henderson, who has the concussion, had to pay Wideman's and the Flames $11,000 legal fees. What? And unfortunately, hasn't reffed a single game since. And unfortunately was forced to retire. Brutal. And after getting this massive suspension, Wideman would play for one more season and then retire himself. And today we still have not heard an update from the arbitration process. When it comes to NHL suspensions, if a player gets over the 10-game mark, they messed up. Besides players who tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, which is a 20-game suspension, we rarely see north of 10 games. Well, besides Rafi Torres, who got a 41-game suspension for his illegal check on Silverberg. However, back in the early 2000s, Todd Bertuzzi would take the crown for the largest suspension in NHL history. Because on the line with Brendan Morrison and Marcus Naslund, which was coined the West Coast Express, Bertuzzi would develop into a superstar and a near 50-goal scorer. And heading into the 03-04 season, the Canucks kept the status quo, which was competing for the cup. However, late into the season, games began to get extremely chippy against the Avalanche. There were fights, rookie Steve Moore would elbow Marcus Naslund directly in the face, the captain at heart of the team, and what really fired up the Canucks was the fact that there wasn't even a penalty called, which really goes to show how important letting these plays go can be. Because instead of being on the power play and having a chance to score and get their justice on the score sheet, the Canucks were now just boiling in rage. And as for Steve Moore, he was now public enemy number 1. Mark Crawford reportedly told the team Steve Moore needed to pay for that cheap shot. And well, Bertuzzi, who was his line mate, took that to heart. because a couple weeks later, in their next matchup, Bertuzzi was fired up, and during the play, he would follow Steve Moore and ask him to fight. Except Moore, he would ignore him, and well, this would happen.
Chat with him, grabs his sweater, gives him a whack, and piling on is Andrei Nikolic, and everybody's into it. Now we get a line brawl, and Hedberg wants Abisher. Johan Hedberg comes to center, and he invites Abisher, who points to the clock.
Bertuzzi, who was pissed off he wouldn't man up to fight, would sucker punch Moore in the side of the head. And after Bertuzzi would land on Moore and a dogpile ensued, Steve Moore would break his back and have a severe concussion that sadly ended his entire hockey career in his rookie season. And as a result, Bertuzzi would be banned indefinitely, a sentence that lasted over 17 months, which also resulted in the double IHF banning him from any other league and on international ice. On top of this, Bertuzzi would plead guilty to assault and would get sued for north of $68 million. And with inflation in 2021, this is the equivalent of being sued for north of $100 million. Crazy. Now, because the lockout occurred right after the season, Bertuzzi in the record book technically only missed 20 games due to suspension. However, if the lockout didn't occur, it would have resulted in a 102 game suspension, including the playoffs. Meaning it could have easily gone up to the 120 plus game mark. Wild. In 2005, Gary Bettman would announce that Bertuzzi would be reinstated into the NHL, as he felt that he was truly remorseful for the events that had taken place. And finally, in 2014, Bertuzzi and Steve Moore would finally agree on an undisclosed settlement for this incident. Eugene Melnyk. Whether it is saving money on arenas to the extent that fans can't drive to games, lowballing a superstar so badly that they would leave out of spite, or perhaps not being available to okay a deal that would have landed the Senators Taylor freaking Hall for Cody Ceci. Believe it or not, back in the early 2000s, Eugene did in fact pay his stars. And it all started with Alexei Yashin, because after being drafted second overall, Yashin would develop into their franchise player. He was a huge body who could put up 40-50 goals. He would take captaincy in 1999. All was good. Well, not at all actually, because going into the 1999-2000 season, Yashin, who felt like he was underpaid at the time, demanded that they ripped up their current contract and give him a pay raise, to the extent where he would refuse to report, and the Senators would even suspend him for the entire season. But here's the thing. Because Yashin had 1 year left on his contract, he thought by sitting out, he would become a free agent. Except, the NHL would launch a lawsuit to fight this rationale, meaning he sat out an entire year of his prime for no reason, on top of creating a rule that you can't just not play your contract and expect it to expire. And not only this, the Senators' ownership would sue Yashin for lost revenue, because he wasn't present, which the Senators would win, meaning that he sat out in his prime, lost millions for not playing, and then had to pay what I can only imagine the Senators millions of dollars in lost revenue. And not only that, a fan would hilariously sue Yashin for $27.5 million for not fulfilling his contract. A fan? What? Now, this was thrown out, and the fan would even have to pay Yashin's lawyer fees. But man, this was a messy situation, which funny enough, leads to our next story. Dany Heatley, because after being acquired in a blockbuster deal for Marian Hossa, Dany Heatley would go from, heater to 50 in mother truck in 07 All-Star Dany Heatley. As my man would put up back-to-back 50-goal campaigns, oh my god. In 07, they would lose in the Cup Finals. They were on a roll. Except, after a coaching change and seeing a slightly reduced role, and as a result, regression in his stats, Heatley would tell the Senators that he was done and he wanted out, and that he was not going to show up to camp. And as a result, the Senators, who recall, were just in the Cup Finals a few years prior, would scramble to find a trade so that they could remain competitive. And so they did, as the Sens would make a deal with Edmonton that would have landed them Dustin Penner, Cogliano, and Smeed for Heater. Except, Heatley had a no trade clause and there was no way he was going to Edmonton, so he shot it down. And so, the Senators would have to scramble once again to find a trade, and so they did, but this time with the San Jose Sharks. However, this new deal took place right after the Sens had to pay Heatley a $4 million signing bonus. A bonus that would have been paid by Edmonton if he had accepted the trade. And Melnyk, being Melnyk, who doesn't like to spend money on a spoiled millionaire, was not happy, and he would sue Dany Heatley. And well, he would win years later. But man, what is with Ottawa being an absolute drama magnet? Uber incidents, bullying incidents, stars refusing to play? Ironically enough, they actually have a great drafting track record. But paying those stars and keeping them happy? Well, that's another story.